He was rejected 27 times. Then fame and wealth came calling. I want you to imagine something. You've just graduated. You're educated. You're hungry. You're ready. And you start applying for jobs. 1 rejection. Fine, that happens. 5 rejections. Okay. Keep going. 10. 15. 20. 30 rejections. 30 doors closed in your face. Pause. Now imagine that the one that stings the most. The one you think about years later, the one that still makes people laugh when you tell the story, is KFC. Not a law firm. Not a bank. Not some elite company with impossible standards. KFC. Pause. The man I'm about to tell you about was rejected 27 times before the world ever heard his name. He failed exams, he failed interviews, he failed businesses. He was turned away by police forces, hotels, restaurants, and universities. And then, one day, he stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the most powerful financial stage on earth, and rang a bell that made him one of the richest people alive. His name is Jack Ma. And this is how it actually happened. Part 1, The Boy from Hangzhou. To understand Jack Ma, you have to understand where he came from. Not just China. Specifically Hangzhou. In 1964, the year Jack was born, Hangzhou was a city of silk factories, canal streets, and old temples. Beautiful, in that quiet, ancient way. But not powerful. Not connected. Not the kind of place that produced world-famous businessmen. His parents were performers, traveling musicians and storytellers in the traditional style. They made enough to get by. Not enough for anything more than that. There were no family connections. No political rank. No inherited wealth. In China at that time, those 3 things weren't just advantages, they were almost everything. And young Jack. His real Chinese name is Ma Yun, but the world would come to know him differently, was not, by any visible measure, remarkable. He was small. He was scrappy. He lost more fights than he won, which apparently happened a lot because he had a talent for arguing with people bigger than him. In the classroom, he was ordinary at best. Math, in particular, was a problem we'll come back to. But there was one thing about him that stood out. One habit that would quietly shape everything that came after. He loved talking to foreigners. Starting around age 12, Jack began waking up early, before school, before most of the city, and riding his bicycle to the Hangzhou Hotel. It was one of the few places in the city where Western tourists stayed. And every morning, he would find someone new. A tourist from Australia. A businessman from the UK. A backpacker from Canada. And he would offer to give them a tour of the city. For free. Not because he was running a business. Not because someone told him to. Just because he wanted to practice English.
The number 9
and because he was curious about the world
Tiger
outside his city.
It is much faster than
he
a
did
taxi.
this for 9
Is that
years.
right? That is very helpful.
9 years
Thank
of
you.
mornings. 9 years of strangers. 9 years of conversations that went nowhere obvious but built something invisible inside him, comfort with the foreign, ease with the unfamiliar, a sense that the world was bigger than anyone around him seemed to think. One Australian tourist, a man named Ken Morley, became a pen pal. They wrote letters back and forth for years. Ken's family even invited Jack to visit Australia as a teenager, which blew open his world in ways he never fully recovered from. And decades later, long after Alibaba existed, long after the IPO, long after the magazine covers, Ken Morley was there. Watching. Proud. That's who Jack Ma was before any of this. A boy on a bike, talking to strangers, because no one told him why he shouldn't. Part 2, The Wall of No. Now let's talk about the rejections. Because they didn't come one at a time. They came in waves. The first wave hit early. Jack failed China's primary school exam. Once. Then he sat it again. Failed it again. He eventually got in, But the message from the education system was already clear: this kid is not exceptional. Middle school came next. The entrance exam. He failed that too. 3 times. 3 times he sat down, tried his best, and walked away without the score he needed. He got there eventually. But at every stage, the doors were opening slowly, reluctantly, like the world was doing him a favor just by letting him in. Then came the one that mattered most. In China, there is an exam called the Gaokao. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most consequential tests a person can take. Students study for years for a single sitting. The score they receive determines which university accepts them and, in many ways, which life they get to live. Jack Ma sat the Gaokao. He failed. He sat it again. Failed again. On his 3rd attempt, he scored, and I want you to hear this number clearly, he scored 1 out of 120 on the mathematics section. 1 out of 120. He still got into university. Hangzhou Teachers Institute. A school so low in the rankings that many students were embarrassed to say its name out loud. But he got in. And while he was there, he applied to Harvard University. He was rejected. He applied again. Rejected again. He applied 10 times in total to Harvard University. Harvard said no. 10 times. He graduated in 1988 into a China that was beginning to open up, beginning to modernize, and he was hungry for it. So he did what any ambitious graduate does. He started applying for jobs. 30 applications. Every kind of company, every kind of role. The police force said no. A hotel he applied to said no. His cousin's restaurant, his own family, didn't have a place for him either. And then KFC arrived in Hangzhou. Now, if you weren't alive in China in the late 80s, you might not fully grasp what KFC represented. It wasn't just fried chicken. It was the West. It was modernity. It was excitement. It was a symbol of the new China meeting the outside world. People lined up around the block just to eat there. 24 people applied to work there. KFC looked at all 24 of them and said yes to 23. Jack Ma was the one they said no to. He eventually found work as an English teacher at a local university. The salary was around $12 a month. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. $12 a month. Rejected by fast food. Turned down by 30 employers. Failed the biggest exam of his life multiple times. At this point in the story, most people write someone off. Most people look at that record and think, this is simply not a person who is going to do something extraordinary. But Jack Ma wasn't most people. And he hadn't even gotten to the interesting part yet. Part 3, something no one else saw. 1995. Jack Ma is 30 years old, still teaching English for almost nothing, when he gets an unexpected opportunity. He's asked to join a trade delegation traveling to the United States to help negotiate a highway construction deal. It falls apart almost immediately. But the trip changes his life. In Seattle, a friend introduces him to something new. Something most people in China have never seen or heard of. The internet. He sits down in front of a computer. And he types a word into a search engine. Beer. Results come back. From Germany. From America. From Japan. From dozens of countries. Information, instantly, from everywhere. He stares at the screen. Then he types another word. China. Nothing comes back. Pause. Now this is a moment I want you to really think about. Because in that gap, in that silence where China should have been, most people would have seen nothing. Just an absence. A quirk of a new technology. Jack Ma saw a billion people who weren't on the map yet. He came home from that trip and did something that everyone in his life thought was somewhere between foolish and delusional. He borrowed $2,000 real money, borrowed money he didn't have, and he started building one of China's first commercial websites. He called it China Pages. The idea was simple: help Chinese businesses create an online presence so that international buyers could find them. His wife was worried. His father-in-law was convinced he'd been scammed by Americans. His friends thought he'd lost his mind. But it worked. Slowly, painfully, expensively, it worked. Companies started paying for listings. The site started growing. And then the government noticed. A state-owned telecommunications company decided they wanted a piece of this internet business. They moved in, took a controlling stake, and began running things the way large bureaucratic organizations run things. Badly. Within a short time, China Pages was effectively dead. Taken over, mismanaged, hollowed out. Jack Ma walked away with almost nothing. Pause. He had the right idea. In the right country. At the right moment in history. And he still lost. That's how close it always is. That's how many ways there are to be correct about something and still not make it. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Part 4, The Apartment. The Dream. The 17 Friends. Jack Ma is 34 years old. He has failed in business, been bypassed by the government, and spent a year working for a Chinese ministry on internet development. Good experience, but not his calling. He goes home to Hangzhou. And he makes a decision. One more time. One more try. But this time, he would do it properly. He gathers 17 people in his apartment. Friends. Former students. His wife. People who know him, who trust him, who are willing to put real things on the line for an idea. And they film it. There is actual footage of this meeting. Jack Ma stands in his small apartment living room and he talks the way only Jack Ma can talk. Fast, electric, completely convinced of something that hasn't happened yet. He tells them it's going to be hard. Genuinely hard. Harder than they can probably imagine right now, sitting comfortably in his living room. He tells them they might not make it. And then he tells them that if they don't try, they definitely won't. They pool their money. Life savings. Loans. Whatever they have. $60,000 in total. And they decide on a name. Alibaba. Why Alibaba? Because Jack wanted a name that traveled. A name that worked in every language, that people in Brazil and Germany and Nigeria and Japan could all recognize. He walked out of a restaurant in San Francisco one day and stopped a stranger on the street. "Do you know Alibaba?" he asked. The stranger said yes. Open sesame. That was it. That was the name. The business idea was this: connect Chinese manufacturers and suppliers with buyers around the world. Give small businesses access to global trade that only big corporations had ever been able to access before. Let the little guys compete. It was bigger than China Pages. Bigger than anything he'd tried before. He went back to Silicon Valley to raise money. And the rejections started again. One investor after another passed. Some politely. Some with obvious confusion about why this English teacher from Hangzhou thought he could build a global tech company. Some just never called back. Goldman Sachs eventually agreed to invest $5 million. Quietly. Almost reluctantly. And then came the meeting that changed everything. At a tech conference, Jack Ma was introduced briefly, almost accidentally, to Masayoshi Son, the founder of SoftBank. One of the most powerful investors in the world. They had 6 minutes together. Sun has said publicly that he has a rule about who he backs: he looks for founders whose eyes shine. Whose belief is visible. Whose conviction you can feel across a table. He looked at Jack Ma for 6 minutes. And then he wired $20 million. No detailed pitch deck. No complex financial modeling. No long due diligence process. $20 million on the basis of a feeling and a vision. He invested in my dream, Jack Ma said later. 6 minutes. $20 million. And now they had something to work with. Part 5, When Everything Nearly Died. 2000. The dot-com bubble, the great technological gold rush of the late 90s, collapsed. Billions of dollars in valuations evaporated. Companies that had been worth hundreds of millions became worthless in weeks. Investors who had thrown money at anything with a website suddenly wanted nothing to do with the internet at all. Alibaba was burning cash. They had
Sell it
months
all
of
right now
runway
before
left.
we lose everything!
Maybe a year.
It's dropping
Maybe
through the
18
floor. I
months
can't
if they
stop
cut
it.
everything to the bone. Jack Ma gathered the team. He told them the truth. He always told them the truth. He said they were going to cut salaries, including his. He said they were going to survive on nothing if that's what it took. He said they hadn't come this far, hadn't bet their savings and their years and their relationships on this, to fold now because the market got scared. They held on. And then, just as things were stabilizing, just as there was air to breathe again, a new threat appeared. eBay entered China. Not a small bet. A serious, committed, fully funded assault on the Chinese e-commerce market. They spent $180 million acquiring a local platform called EachNet, and they came in ready to dominate. eBay's CEO at the time was quoted as saying that competing with them in China would be like trying to fight a shark in the ocean. Jack Ma heard this. And he said, very calmly, eBay is a shark in the ocean. We are a crocodile in the Yangtze River. Let us fight in the river. In 2003, he launched Taobao. Where eBay charged sellers fees, Taobao was free. Where eBay was built for Western users, Taobao was built for Chinese sellers and Chinese buyers, with features and tools and a cultural understanding that eBay simply didn't have. And within 3 years, eBay gave up. They closed their Chinese operations and exited the market entirely. The river won. Pause. I think about that moment a lot. Because it would have been so easy, so completely rational, to look at eBay arriving with $180 million and say, that's it. We can't compete with that. We had a good run. But Jack Ma didn't see a company with more resources. He saw a foreign company fighting on his ground. And he knew something eBay didn't, he understood this river. He'd grown up in it. That knowledge, that specific, unglamorous, locally earned knowledge, was worth more than all of eBay's money. Part 6, The World Catches Up. After Taobao, the story stops being about survival. And it starts being about scale. Alibaba didn't just grow. It became infrastructure. Alipay launched and quietly transformed the way 1 billion people handled money, payments, transfers, savings, all through their phones, years before the West fully caught up to the idea of mobile payments. In 2009, Jack Ma invented a holiday. Singles Day. November 11th, 11/11. For ones, representing people who are alone. He turned it into a shopping event. A celebration. A reason for people to treat themselves. It became the single biggest shopping day in human history. We're not talking bigger than Black Friday or Cyber Monday. We're talking bigger than Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. By a large margin. In a single 24-hour period, Alibaba processes more transactions than most countries' entire economies generate in a week. And then came September 2014. Alibaba listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The IPO raised $25 billion. The largest public offering in history at that moment. And on that floor, in that building, the man who had been rejected from 30 jobs, including KFC, rang the bell. His net worth crossed $20 billion before the day was out. Time magazine put him on the cover. Forbes. Fortune. The Economist. Every major publication in the world wanted to know who this man was and how this had happened. He was invited to speak at Davos. At the World Economic Forum. At the United Nations. The boy from Hangzhou who scored 1 out of 120 on his university entrance maths exam was now being asked for his economic forecasts by world leaders. And Harvard, the university that had rejected him 10 times, now has case studies about him that professors assign to their MBA students. Let that land for a second. The people who said no are now teaching their students about him. Closing, what it actually means. I've told you this story because the numbers are extraordinary. The IPO, the billions, the records, all of it is extraordinary. But that's not actually why I keep coming back to it. Here's what I keep coming back to. Jack Ma never confused a rejection with a verdict. That's it. That's the whole thing. When KFC said no, he didn't think, I'm not good enough for fast food. He thought, okay, what's next? When Harvard said no 10 times, he didn't think, I'm not smart enough for great things. He just moved on, and built something that Harvard now studies. When the government took his first company, he didn't think, I don't deserve to be an entrepreneur. He went home, called 17 friends, and started again. There's a version of the Jack Ma story that ends in that apartment in 1988. $12 a month. Rejected by every employer who ever saw his resume. Rejected by the exam system. Rejected by the universities he dreamed of. Rejected by the fast food chain down the street. There's a version of this story where he looks at all of that and decides the world has spoken. Or he accepts the no as information about his own limits rather than about the limits of the people saying it. He didn't do that. And I'm not telling you this because I think persistence is a magic word. It isn't. Some ideas don't work. Some timing is wrong. Some dreams need to be revised. But here's what's true about Jack Ma, he was never the most talented person in the room. He will tell you that himself. He couldn't code. He didn't understand technology in any deep way. He wasn't a financial genius or a supply chain expert or a visionary engineer. What he had, what no exam ever tested and no interviewer ever saw, was the ability to imagine things that didn't exist yet, and the stubbornness to believe in them when nobody else did. That is not a skill you're born with. That is a decision you make. Every morning. When the door is closed. When the email doesn't come back. When the number on your exam paper is 1 out of 120. You decide, this is not the verdict. This is just today. Pause. If you're sitting with your own wall of no right now, your own list of applications that went nowhere, ideas that got laughed at, plans that fell apart, I want you to remember one thing. The person who rejected Jack Ma from KFC is not famous. Jack Ma is. Maybe the no isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's just the beginning. If this story hit differently than you expected, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Not someone who's already winning. Someone who's in the middle of the hard part. And if you want more stories like this, stories about the people the world almost overlooked, subscribe. We find these stories so you don't have to go looking for them alone. One last thing. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what's a rejection in your own life that, looking back, turned out to be something else entirely? A door that closed and led you somewhere better? I read every one. I'll see you in the next story.